Hello and welcome back to the secret classroom here on the FreeMelon Society. My name is Martyr. Thank you so much for joining me here once again. In previous episodes and previous videos, I've discussed the importance of history and how history is essentially the recording of human experience. And the most important way to convey knowledge to yourself and to others is through history, is through the recording of history. And this is what I talked about in the documentary that I just recently uploaded. If you haven't seen it, go and check it out. I'll post a link for that. What I wanted to talk to you about today is looking back into ancient cultures and ancient practices and taking too many liberties and taking too much from them, stuff that we should, with a critical eye, be more discerning of. Now, throughout human history, there have been religions and ideologies and belief systems and cultures and modalities of living that have risen and fallen in popularity. Some we've taken extracts from and modeled our own societies on them. But anyway, there have been hundreds of these throughout history. Some are better than others. When I say better, what I mean is some are more in line with morality and truth and goodness than others. Okay, this should come as no surprise to anybody. Okay, this has nothing to do with being prejudiced or being racist or whatnot. It just so happens that in designing a culture, in designing an economy, in designing a way of life, some systems work better than others. Some systems are based in more truths than others. Okay? If there are 6 different institutions that are geared towards designing chairs, there might be 1 or 2 that are less efficient at designing chairs than others. They may not necessarily be cranking out faulty chairs deliberately. It's just that the system employs conditions that are less conducive to the production of good chairs. That's just how it works, and it works the same way with religious systems and belief systems and ideologies. When we look back in history and we regard some of the cultures that have a more benevolent or high-standing character than others, sometimes what we do is we accidentally regard them as infallible. It's because some of these groups and some of these cultures did so many things that were right that it tricks us into accepting everything they've done as right, okay? But in order to safeguard against making that mistake, we need to cultivate the ability to think rationally and logically and clearly and moralistically when we analyze those individuals, those cultures, those religions. Retain our critical eye, and with a firm understanding and a firm basis in natural moral principle, we can analyze the ancient cultures, take from them and extract from them the things that do work and the things that are truly based in goodness and rectitude and moral upstanding nature. Take from them the good and maybe leave out the stuff that doesn't necessarily work, or that which is dated for that time that doesn't work as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a couple of examples here for you so that you can see what I'm talking about, and then we'll conclude, and that'll be it for today. I can remember, I guess I'm about to digress a little bit here, but I can remember having a conversation with a Muslim lady, in the neighborhood. And she was just asking me about, what I was eating or whatnot. I wasn't lecturing or anything. But the conversation just kind of stumbled upon that topic. And so I told her what I'm eating and whatnot. And, she was surprised. So she had questions for me. And then when she realized that I don't eat any kind of meat or whatnot, she was a bit surprised. She said, not even milk, not even this. I'm like, no, not any of that. Anyway, I don't want to drag on this, cut to the chase, but I ended up asking her some of the reasons. Could she provide me with some of the reasons why she thought that it was necessary to drink milk, and take animal life and eat it and whatnot? And she couldn't provide me with any rational reason for that besides Islam tells us that is correct. Allah tells us that it is proper for us to do that. She couldn't give me any. Now, on the other hand, when she asked me for reasons, I could provide her very, very concrete, provable, rational, logical reasons why anyone would want to abstain from eating carcasses. But on the other hand, she could not provide me with one single concrete reason why eating meat and milk and dairy is good, save for, oh, that's what the book says. Okay, now, I would submit to you that this is an immature, childish way of thinking. If we're going to make any progress in our conscious evolution, we cannot relegate our thinking to that type of simplicity. I had the same conversation with a Buddhist. I believe it was a while back, and says, "Yeah, the Buddha ate meat too, so therefore I can do it." Well, that's quite childish. My father abused me, so therefore I should abuse my kids in the future. Same thinking, same type of thinking, right? My father didn't abuse me. I'm just using that as an example. Okay, so let's take a look at Native Americans and the shamanistic tradition. And I'm not going to go into super detail here, but just want to generally outline a couple of points. Native American culture, for the most part, was a very, very moralistic, very harmonious. They lived in harmony with nature for the most part. They had a deep connection with the spirit. They had a deep connection with emotion. They had a very deep connection with their emotional bodies and the importance that the emotion played in the interconnectedness with their surroundings. A lot of the influence of Tibetan dream yoga bled into the Native American culture. So they understood that knowledge could be gained from the out-of-body experience, from the dream state, right? So they had these very, very, very commendable practices and beliefs that had to do with natural laws and natural truths. So, I myself have looked into that and studied that and tried to take from it what was applicable. So they do so many things right. But just like many cultures and many traditions, they're not perfect, right? They're not perfect. The Native American diet, depending on which tribe you're talking about, okay, heavily focused and relied on game, on animal meat, buffalo meat primarily. These are some tribes that relied almost 100% on the dead bodies of buffalo, in order to live and survive. As a result, their health was not good. Their health was quite deplorable. Life expectancy was extremely low. Of course, there were other factors involved, conflicts with other tribes, and, some tribes more warlike than others. So there are a lot of these other survival factors, but health was a major one. In many anthropological analyses, it was shown that their bodies suffered from lots of degenerative diseases, lots of preventable lifestyle-related conditions and whatnot, weak, porous bone structures, and, they suffered a lot in the realms of health. Many tribes were very warlike amongst each other. Population numbers, in actual fact, in Native American tribes were on the decline. They were steadily declining, and this is pre-Columbus, okay? So way before Columbus, their numbers were steadily declining. So they weren't necessarily doing super, super well. But yes, they did have a lot of commendable properties that we could very, very easily model our current way of life on and do much better. Now, in terms of one small aspect of their ideology, in terms of harmonizing with nature, I'll play a quick clip here for you.
To understand the native people's relationship to nature, we have to try to put ourselves in their place. If you live very close to nature for thousands of years, you learn to identify with it to an extraordinary extent. You learn to move in the woods as if they were an extension of your own body. You grow very close to the animals that you hunt. You learn how to imitate the sounds they make. But one belief is held almost universally. All living things, plants as well as animals, have souls. Just as biologists now agree that all living things are physically related, so the Indians and the Inuit believed, and continue to believe today, that they are all spiritually related. This means that the idea of give and take is the essence of their lives. If you go hunting for a bear, for example, it isn't you who are taking its life. It is the bear which is giving you its life. It isn't you who are taking its life. It is the bear which is giving you its life.
When you take an animal's life, it is not you taking the life, it is the animal submitting willingly and giving the life to you. Okay? Do you understand how dangerous an ideology that is? That is so dangerous. Now imagine, if you will, how they would use that ideology in terms of war with someone else. If you're a kid growing up in that culture and you have been conditioned to believe that killing an animal so that you can eat it, right, is not an act of killing, it's just the animal giving itself to you, is it so much of a stretch to imagine that you would extrapolate that to humans as well? Maybe if you've been led to believe that there's another evil tribe out there, and so it's within your rights to go and kill everyone in that tribe and take their resources, it's not so much of a stretch to imagine that they would have it in mind that that tribe is willingly submitting themselves to you, and you are not killing, right? It's a very dangerous ideology. Here's an article from the National Humanities Center describing the near extinction of the buffalo. The most effective technique was what Crow Indians called driving buffalo over embankments, which involved enticing and leading buffaloes to the edges of cliffs or bluffs up to 70 feet high, and then driving them over to instant death or a broken back or leg or other crippling incapacity, ended by a thrust from a lance or a blow from a stone maul. The average mature bison weighed some 700 to 800 pounds and yielded 225 to 400 pounds of meat, and communal hunts resulting in deaths of dozens or hundreds of animals, 30, 60, 100, and even 600 to 800 or 1,000 were reported killed. This produced fantastic quantities of meat. 50 cows, for example, yielded 11,000 to 20,000 pounds of usable meat. Many European observers were struck by the gormandizing as well as by what struck them as subsequent profligacy or indolence. At times the Indians used everything, but on occasion they did not. And the observers remarked upon putrefied carcasses, animals left untouched, or Indians who took only the best parts of the meat. Sometimes Indians were said to kill whole herds only for the fat-filled tongues. So you see, guys, it's like anything. As soon as the supply increases, people get complacent with the supply. There's no longer competition. You no longer really identify that which you're seeking as highly valuable because they can be found everywhere. So what do? You start to pick and choose. The likelihood that you become more wasteful is much, much more likely. Of course, we have this myth surrounding the honorable hunting of buffalo and bison. These animals, it wasn't very hard to kill them. Big, slow, lumbering animals that you could sneak up on pretty easily. So yeah, when you've got our textbooks, our politically correct textbooks, extolling the virtues of these cultures, yeah, what they don't tell you is that these people often behaved like the average human being that we know of now and today, right? It wasn't so different. They could be wasteful, warlike, profligate, and indolent, often conducting in behaviors that were directly antithetical to the high moral standards that we are told they abided by at all times. Let me tell you what's happening there. Because we've got a population of humans living outside of their natural habitat, okay, the natural human habitat originally is the tropics, okay? We don't have the skin, we don't have the fur, we are not biologically equipped to be living anywhere on the globe. It's only our thinking and our ability to conceptualize and our ability to control our environment, right, that lets us override our natural biological limitations. But if we were living within our biological limitations, we would have to live in the tropics. Okay. So when we go outside of that, now we're living outside of our means. So what has happened? is that in order to rationalize a modality of living that is necessary for survival, they have come up with a religious belief system or a cultural belief system that has rationalized and that allows them to kill animals without the guilt associated with killing animals that you would naturally infer when the realization that you are not a meat eater is set into the mind. Okay, do you see how that works? Now, the realization that the original elders of, these cultures would recognize in their bodies that they are nowhere close in similarity to any of the carnivorous animals in nature. This information must have dawned on them at some point. Okay, they must have been aware that they are not like the wolves and the bears. I mean, it's impossible to assume that these people did not recognize this. But because they were in a survival situation, they had to come up with a way to rationalize to their people a belief system where they could be comfortable killing, right? So as not to incur the negative karma or the guilt associated with killing when it was obviously not natural to the human system. Okay? So you understand how that works? I remember having a conversation with a friend, a meat-eating friend who went on about, well, my native ancestors, this is always how we've lived. And we've always survived, and therefore that's why I'm doing it. Well, it takes a bit more of an elevated state of awareness to be able to see the error in that type of thinking. Okay? Let's use another example. Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is one of the most ancient forms, it's one of the most ancient health systems, okay, that we can find in human history. The Ayurvedic health system was used primarily in ancient India. And again, you can find lots of information on Ayurveda. You can do your own searches. You'll find some really good information in the Ayurvedic system. Stuff that you can apply to your thinking today that will help enhance your understanding of how the body works, the different conditions that govern health and vitality, and techniques that you can employ to help to expedite a healthy body. Again, as I said before, it's not perfect. What they teach you in Ayurveda is that there are different body types, okay? In the human species, there are different body types. These body types, you can't change. This is how you're born. This is largely not true. And we have the corroborating evidence of millions upon millions of animals in nature to give a testament to the faulty nature of this belief. I use the same example all the time. It doesn't matter what species you select as your example. Every species has a species-specific diet. Blood types, for example. This, a lot of this has bled into the blood type diet. Where you have a particular blood type. So, cheese and dairy is good for this blood type, and grains and nuts and seeds or whatever are good for this blood type. Okay, nonsense. Okay, I call BS. Giraffes, for example. And I've got a hard-on for giraffes for some reason. I don't know what it is. Giraffes have different blood types. The same species of giraffe will have different blood types. A population of lions might have different blood types. They all eat the exact same thing because they're all lions or they're all giraffes. And nature has predisposed the giraffe body to a particular diet. Doesn't matter if you're a different blood type. Human beings are no different, and Ayurveda makes the mistake of placing you in a box and telling you that a particular diet, foods in use in Ayurveda like oils and cheeses and butters, different grains and whatnot, all these foods you'll find are in use in the Ayurvedic system. And it's not that using the system won't get you healthier. It will, depending on where you're coming from. So if you're coming from a pretty rough diet, converting to the Ayurvedic system will probably get you healthier in relation to what you were doing before. But in order to achieve the highest modality of health, it is necessary to eat as naturally as possible and in as much harmony as possible with the restrictions that nature has placed on your physiology. So it's necessary to recognize natural principles, and when we regard ancient cultures and ancient practices, to take from them what is correct and maybe discard or amend what is not so correct. Okay? The Essenes. Every once in a while I've talked about the Essene culture and the Essene tradition and Gnosticism. And again, if the world were converted into the Essene belief system, they were just to wake up tomorrow and everyone lived like the Essenes, we'd be living in a utopia, right? But like all things, the Essenes weren't perfect. Many times people have told me, hey, Eli, I've heard you talk about the Essene culture, but the Essenes used to eat a lot of bread. So does that mean we should eat bread in our diet? No. That's not what it means. I know the Essenes were a very, very highly moralistic people. They were not warlike at all. They believed in the brotherhood of man and unity consciousness. They believed in all these wonderful, wonderful things that I wish we adopted. But they were not perfect. You have to remember that the adepts of the time, so the high-ranking, highly mentally evolved adepts of ancient cultures, they always related to and taught their pupils and their small pockets, their small cliques, at a level that was accessible to them. So the Essenes, you have to remember, these guys were living in dry, hot deserts. Is it really going to be advantageous to teach them that they should be living on high water content fruits all the time? It's not sustainable for them. It just wouldn't make sense. They needed something that they could rely upon consistently to sustain the culture. And it couldn't be fruit because the climate was just inhospitable. So yeah, they included lots of bread in their diet, but that's because of necessity. They had to do what they had to do to, at least survive. But with what we understand now, it's very clear that bread and grains are not natural to human physiology, right? Yeah, we can process the crap out of them and make bread so that it's suitable, but it's in its raw form, it's not human food. So we have to have enough maturity to take from the Essene culture what works and leave behind what is not as applicable. Do you know what else the Essenes used to do? The Essenes used to believe very, very highly in the sanctity of semen, of ejaculate. So what they would do in some of their rituals is they would, excuse me if there are children listening to this, but I'm just going to flat out say it. They would ejaculate all over each other. Yeah, they would drop human nectar on each other's heads. They would, this is what anointing means. They would anoint each other with semen. This is where the word seminary comes from. You go to church, you go to seminary, seminary, semen. This is where it comes from. It's the sanctity of the Gnostic belief in the sanctity of sperm, of semen, of the life fluid. And again, because they were so connected with the life force, they regarded the life semen as the most holy of holy human byproduct that could be produced. So yeah, so they would have these weird rituals where they would shower in it and people would, okay. You can see that might not be the greatest thing to adopt, especially now, right? You aren't necessarily going to become more holy or more enlightened if you guzzle human ejaculate, right? Anyway, you get the idea. The main point of this, what I'm trying to teach you in this, is that go and study ancient cultures, because by and large, they did way more right back then, depending on the culture that you examine. Way more right. In terms of spirituality, in terms of connectedness, in terms of even health and diet and eating, so many cultures did it right. And we would be silly not to look back on them and take from them what worked. But you have to retain your critical, logical, reasonable eye, and you have to be able to take a prejudicial look and discern the good from the not so good. Okay, even in regards to highly moralistic, highly evolved cultures in our past. Does that behavior align itself with natural principles and the natural laws that govern creation and govern nature? Okay, yeah, that's something that you should take into consideration. If it doesn't, well, maybe you should leave it behind then. So this is just something to keep on board, keep on the shelf when we study ancient practices and ancient cultures. And I thought that's just something that I should share with you here today. Okay, I'm very happy that you're joining me here for this lesson once again. If you have not subscribed to the FreeMelon Society, please subscribe to that now. Give me a thumbs up, help me out with this channel, and leave a comment if you've got something to say. If you think I'm being racist or you think I'm being, intolerant of other cultures, whatever, sure, let me know. I assure you that's not the intention here. The intention is just simply to cultivate higher moral thought, higher understanding, and use that to ignite the best in humankind from now and here on into the future. Okay? Thanks a lot, guys, and we will see you next time here in the secret classroom on the FreeMelon Society.